Krishna. Okay, so we're starting from chapter 12, 12.1. Arjuna Vacha. Evam satata yukta ye bhaktas tvam paryupasate ye chaptaksharam vyaktam tesham te yoga vittamaha. Arjuna inquired, which are considered to be more perfect? Those who are always properly engaged in your devotional service, or those who worship the impersonal Brahman, the unmanifested? So in this most critical chapter on devotional service, Arjuna is asking the most important question of Sakara versus Nirakara, which is better. Krishna has now explained about the personal, impersonal, and universal, and has described all kinds of devotees and yogis. So Krishna has already explained personal, impersonal, universal form, and has described all kinds of devotees and yogis. Generally, the transcendentalists can be divided into two classes. One is the impersonalist and the other is a personalist. The personalist devotee engages himself with all energy in the service of the Supreme Lord. The impersonalist also engages himself not directly in the service of Krishna, but in meditation on the impersonal Brahman, the unmanifested. We find in this chapter that of the different processes for realization of the absolute truth, Bhakti Yoga, devotional service, is the highest. If one at all desires to have the association of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, then he must take to devotional service. Those who worship the Supreme Lord directly by devotional service are called personalists. Those who engage themselves in meditation on the impersonal Brahman are called impersonalists. Arjuna here is questioning which position is better. There are different ways to realize the absolute truth, but Krishna indicates in this chapter that Bhakti Yoga, devotional service to him, is the highest of all. It is the most direct and it is the easiest means for association with Godhead. In the second chapter of Bhagavad Gita, the Supreme Lord explained that a living entity is not the material body, he is a spiritual spark, and the absolute truth is the spiritual whole. So living entity is a spark, and absolute truth, that is Krishna, is the spiritual whole. In the seventh chapter, he spoke of the living entity as being part and parcel of the supreme whole, and recommended that he transfer his attention fully to the whole. Then again in the 8th chapter, it was said that anyone who thinks of Krishna at the time of quitting his body is at once transferred to the spiritual sky, to the abode of Krishna. And at the end of the 6th chapter, the Lord clearly said that of all yogis, one who always thinks of Krishna within himself is considered the most perfect. So in practically every chapter, the conclusion has been that one should be attached to the personal form of Krishna, for that is the highest spiritual realization. Nevertheless, there are those who are not attached to the personal form of Krishna. They are so firmly detached that even in the preparation of commentaries to Bhagavad Gita, they want to distract other people from Krishna and transfer all devotion to the impersonal Brahmajyoti. They prefer to meditate on the impersonal form of the absolute truth, which is beyond the reach of the senses and is not manifest. And so, factually, there are two classes of transcendentalists. Now, Arjuna is trying to settle the question of which process is easier and which of the classes is most perfect. In other words, he's clarifying his own position because he's attached to the personal form of Krishna. He's not attached to the impersonal Brahman. He wants to know whether his position is secure. The impersonal manifestation, either in this material world or in the spiritual world of the Supreme Lord, is a problem for meditation. Actually, one cannot perfectly conceive of the impersonal feature of the absolute truth. Therefore, Arjuna wants to say, what is the use of such a waste of time? Arjuna experienced in the 11th chapter that to be attached to the personal form of Krishna is best because he could thus understand all other forms at the same time, and there's no disturbance to his love for Krishna. This important question asked of Krishna by Arjuna will clarify the distinction between the impersonal and personal conceptions of the absolute truth. Okay, pretty straightforward purport, unless anybody has any questions. Very important, though. Okay. 12.2 Shri Bhagavanu Vacha Maya Vesha Mano Ye Mam Nitya Yukta Upaste Shraddhaya Parayopetaste Me Yukta Tamamataha. Supreme Personality of Godhead said, those who fix their minds on my personal form and are always engaged in worshipping me with great and transcendental faith, Yukta Tamaha, are considered to be by me to be most perfect, Yukta Tamaha. So great and transcendental faith, not mundane faith, transcendental faith. It must be great. In answer to Arjuna's question, Krishna clearly says that he who concentrates upon his personal form and who worships him with faith and devotion is to be considered most perfect in yoga. For one in such Krishna consciousness, there are no material activities because everything is done for Krishna. Please note. For one in such Krishna consciousness, which means that who has great transcendental faith, there are no material activities because everything is done for Krishna. A pure devotee is constantly engaged. Sometimes he chants, sometimes he hears or reads books about Krishna, or sometimes he cooks prasadam, or goes to the marketplace to purchase something for Krishna, or sometimes he washes the temple or the dishes. Whatever he does not let a single moment pass without devoting his activities to Krishna. Such action is in full samadhi. 12.34 ये त्वक्षरं निर्देशम् अव्यक्तं पर्युपासते सर्वत्र गमचिन्त्यं च कूटस्थं अचलं ध्रुवं संयम्येन्द्रियग्रामं सर्वत्र समबुद्धयः ते प्राप्नुवन्ति मामेव सर्वभूतहिते रताः. But those who fully worship the unmanifested, that is impersonal Brahman, that which lies beyond the perception of the senses, the all-pervading, inconceivable, unchanging, fixed, and immovable, the impersonal conception of the absolute truth, by controlling the various senses and being equally disposed to everyone, such persons engaged in the welfare of all at last achieve me. So Krishna is saying they are also engaged in the welfare of all, but it's very difficult for them to achieve me. At last, meaning after a long time, they achieve me. Those who do not directly worship the Supreme Godhead Krishna, but who attempt to achieve the same goal by an indirect process, also ultimately achieve the same goal, Sri Krishna. After many births, the man of wisdom seeks refuge in me, knowing that Vasudeva Sarvamiti Sa Mahatma Sudurlabha. When a person comes to full knowledge after many births, he surrenders unto Lord Krishna. If one approaches the Godhead by the method mentioned in this verse, he has to control the senses, render service to everyone, and engage in the welfare of all beings. It is inferred that one has to approach Lord Krishna. Otherwise, there is no perfect realization. Often there is much penance involved before one fully surrenders to Krishna. So there is penance involved. So there's a lot of difficulties, tests, etc. before one fully surrenders to Krishna. Theoretically, we might be thinking that we are surrendered, but we will know only when we are put to test. Sometimes we fail in the test. So it's a bit of a penance. It's a lot of difficulty that one has to go through before one fully surrenders. In order to perceive the super soul within the individual soul, one has to cease the sensual activities of seeing, hearing, tasting, working, etc. Then one comes to understand that the Supreme Soul is present everywhere. Realizing this, one envies no living entity. He sees no difference between man and animal because he sees soul only, not the outer covering. But for the common man, this method of impersonal realization is very difficult. One has to cease sensual activities. So we don't know what this process is, but one has to cease sensual activities of seeing, hearing, tasting, working, etc. That means that completely cut oneself off from all activities of the senses. It's very difficult. And by doing that, one finally comes to understand the Supreme Soul. But Prabhupada is saying, for a common man, this method is very difficult. How can you just stop all activities of the senses? Not possible.
True, I have a question.
Yeah.
For a person who is in Bhakti path, is it beneficial that he can come to a stage of super soul realization when he cut off and ceases all these activities, or that is not needed as far as we worship Supreme Personality of Godhead?
How will
So
we
we
do
are
it?
already above it.
No, how will we do it? But how will we cut off? Can we cut off?
No, so we cut off in the sense that we completely do devotional service, right? Or let's say do Krishna karma. So maybe that stage can come where we can realize super soul,
And that
right?
has to come. I mean, that is Brahma Bhuta state. Brahma Bhuta Prasannatma na Sochit na Kankshati.
Hmm.
Everybody, irrespective of what path they follow, have to first come to Brahman realization, then only move forward. So that has to happen. I mean,
Okay,
the
so we are
easiest
saying that.
process is by following devotion. No, okay. So this is important question in the sense. So there are, see, in devotional service, by engaging 24 hours in devotional service under supreme guidance, superior guidance, Guru, completely following his orders, one will very easily come to Brahmabhuta, provided one is completely committed, 24 hours bhakti under direct guidance of Guru, or a very able representative of Guru. But for those who are mostly, I mean, and this will be mostly applicable for brahmacharis, for grastas who are living outside and not really under any specific mentorship or guidance on a day-to-day basis, what will happen is we will not be 24 hours engaged in Krishna consciousness. Now, we'll be engaged in other activities which might not, I mean, sometimes it's too far away from Krishna consciousness, sometimes it's somewhat near, we engage in all kinds of activities, right, in Grihastha life. So in that case, sometimes it is beneficial to apply some of these other teachings. Okay, so let me put it this way. One who engages 24 hours, automatically he'll come to that stage. But for many of us who are not engaged 24 hours, we might also have to try implementing some of the other processes. For example, trying to impose control over ourselves by controlling the mind, by using gnana and altering our behavior. We will have to try all these. We'll have to do all this, not try. We'll have to do all these as well, right? Because we are not completely engaged in 24 hours devotional service. And that process is susukam kartum avyayam. It is easy and it's also full of happiness. But because we are not 24 hours engaged in that way, we also have to go through this kind of indirect process, which is followed by other yoga processes. Like, I mean, this is part of yama, niyama, etc. And sometimes we have to do that because otherwise we might move far away from Krishna consciousness. So we might have to artificially try to follow some of these processes of mind control, sense control, etc., etc.
Yeah.
So that way some of it might be required, but the more focus needs to be on how I can engage more and more in direct Krishna consciousness, direct bhakti activities, because that is more effective, most effective.
Yeah. So, Prabhu, like, can we directly come to the platform where we realize Supreme Personality of Godhead, or it is not possible unless we pass through Brahman realization, then Paramatma
No,
realization?
not Paramatma realization is not mentioned, but Brahman realization is mentioned. And when from Brahman realization is also mentioned because that is the first step out of material. One has to enter Brahman, platform of Brahman, because now we are in the material platform, and getting out of the material platform means entering Brahman platform. So in that sense, we can say that it is Brahman realization, but it's not like it is first step of Bhagavan realization, then second step Paramatma realization has to happen, etc. But process of devotional service is such that one comes to Brahmabhuta stage and then he achieves perfection. And when he achieves perfection, he realizes all the three. He realizes Paramatma also. So it's not like there's an intermediate stage for Paramatma realization. And like I said, Brahman realization is more realizing that, okay, I am Brahman, I am not material, I am the soul. That is Brahma Bhuta stage.
Mm. Okay, true. Yeah.
Okay, 12.5. Kleshodikatarastesham abhyaktasaktachetasam abhyakta hi gatir dukkham dehavadbhiravapyate. For those whose minds are attached to the unmanifested impersonal feature of the Supreme, advancement is very troublesome. To make progress in that discipline is always difficult for those who are embodied. Embodied means those who have a body. The group of transcendentalists who follow the path of inconceivable, unmanifested, impersonal feature of the Supreme Lord are called Gnana Yogis. And persons who are in full Krishna consciousness, engaged in devotional service to the Lord, are called Bhakti Yogis. Now here the difference between Gnana Yoga and Bhakti Yoga is definitely expressed. The process of Gnana Yoga, although ultimately bringing one to the same goal, is very troublesome, whereas the path of Bhakti Yoga, process of being in direct service to the Supreme Person embodied, is easier and is natural for the embodied soul. The individual soul is embodied since time immemorial. It is very difficult for him to simply theoretically understand that he is not the body. Very difficult. We cannot simply keep saying theoretically, I am not body, I am not the body. Therefore, the Bhakti Yogi accepts the deity of Krishna as worshipable because there is some bodily conception fixed in the mind, which can thus be applied. So what does this mean? That means that we are naturally connect to something which is material, which is made of material elements. So the Lord mercifully takes up this Archa Vigraha form, which is made of material element, so that it kind of matches our conception of, being attached to something material. Of course, worship of the Supreme Person regarded in his form within the temple is not idol worship. There is evidence in the Vedic literature that worship may be saguna or nirguna, or the Supreme possessing or not possessing attributes. Worship of the deity in the temple is saguna worship, for the Lord is represented by material qualities. But the form of the Lord, though represented by material qualities such as stone, wood, or oil paint, is not actually material. That is the absolute nature of the Supreme Lord. So though it is material element, Lord's form is not material. The Archa Vigraha actually is not material because when the Lord accepts that form as an incarnation, that form becomes spiritualized. So the material elements become spiritualized. So actually it is the Supreme Lord himself residing in the temple. A crude example may be given here. We may find some mailboxes in the street, and if we post our letters in those boxes, they will naturally go to their destination without difficulty. Of course, I mean, nowadays we don't find any mailboxes. We don't use any mailboxes, but yeah, it was prevalent then. But any old box or an imitation, which we may find somewhere, but which is not authorized by the post office, will not do the work. Similarly, God has an authorized representation in the deity form, which is called Archa Vigraha. The Archa Vigraha is an incarnation of the Supreme Lord. God will accept service through that form. The Lord is omnipotent, all-powerful. Therefore, by his incarnation as Archa Vigraha, he can accept the services of the devotee just to make it convenient for the man in conditioned life, because we are conditioned by material nature. So Lord accepts our service. So for a devotee, there is no difficulty in approaching the Supreme immediately and directly. But for those who are following the impersonal way of spiritual realization, the path is difficult. They have to understand the unmanifested representation of the Supreme through such Vedic literatures as Upanishads. They have to learn the language, understand the non-perceptual perceptual feelings, and realize all these processes. Prabhupada is saying, see, this is so unnatural to us. How can we get attached to something which has no form? Now, what are these non-perceptual feelings? Because we can't perceive these feelings, but we have to understand what these feelings are with respect to Brahman. So learn a new language in the sense because it's a completely different world. So it's very difficult. It's not very easy for a common man. A person in Krishna consciousness engaged in devotional service simply by the guidance of the bona fide spiritual master, simply by offering regulative obeisances unto the deity, simply by hearing the glories of the Lord, simply by eating remnants of foodstuffs offered to the Lord, realizes the Supreme Person of Godhead very easily. So while we are engaged in this process and maybe we are not able to understand how simply we are going near the Lord, the process is very simple compared to other options, other processes. So we can simply, by doing these things, realize the Supreme Lord very easily. There is no doubt that the impersonalists are unnecessarily taking a troublesome path with the risk of not realizing this is absolute truth at the ultimate end. So there's a risk because there's no guarantee by impersonalist process that we will actually realize the absolute truth, because we might fail. But the personalist, without any risk, trouble, or difficulty, approaches the Supreme Personality directly without any risk, because this is natural to us and very little chance that we can fail. And even if we fail, it's not the end of it. We'll continue in the next life. A similar passage appears in Srimad Bhagavatam. It is stated there that if one ultimately has to surrender to the Supreme Personality of Godhead, but instead takes the trouble to understand what is Brahman and what is not Brahman, neti neti, and spends his whole life in that way, the result is simply troublesome. Therefore, it is advised here that one should not take up this troublesome path of self-realization, because there is uncertainty in the ultimate result. A living entity is eternally an individual soul, and if he wants to merge into the spiritual whole, he may accomplish the realization of the eternal and knowledgeable aspects of his original nature. But the blissful portion is not realized, because Sat, Chit, one can realize by other process, but Ananda he cannot realize. By the grace of some devotees, such a transcendentalist, highly learned in the process of Jnana Yoga, may come to the point of Bhakti Yoga or devotional service. At that time, long practice in impersonalism also becomes a source of trouble, because he cannot give up the idea, because he's been so attached to Nirakar Brahman. So I met somebody, they are so kicked about this Krishna is Shunya, everything is Shunya. They cannot really, they can't even, sit for a moment and think, how can it be Shunya? They just firmly believe that it is Shunya. So they cannot give up the idea. Therefore, an embodied soul is always in difficulty with unmanifest, both at the time of practice and the time of realization. Very difficult. Every living soul is partially independent, and one should know for certain that this unmanifested realization is against the nature of his spiritual blissful self. It is against the nature of his self, because self itself is Satchidananda. One should not take up to this process for every individual living entity, the process of Krishna consciousness, which entails full engagement in devotional service, is the best way. If one wants to ignore this devotional service, there is the danger of turning to atheism. Very dangerous. Thus, the process of centering attention on the unmanifested, the inconceivable, which is beyond the approach of the senses, as already expressed in this verse, should never be encouraged at any time, especially in this age. It is not advised by Lord Krishna. Powerful purports. Prabhupada is refuting impersonalism, his favorite topic.
Prabhupada mentioned that Nirguna is basically super attributes, right? So that is something which we can use in preaching. I think when they say that Nirguna means not any form, that is not the correct thing, right? It is same supreme without any attributes.
No. Nirguna means without material attributes.
Okay. Because in the purport he written supreme without any attributes, so it is material.
No. It's okay. There is evidence in the Vedic literature that worship may be Saguna or Nirguna, supreme possessing or not possessing attributes. Worship of the deity in the temple is Saguna, for the Lord is represented by material qualities. Okay. So in this, but elsewhere, Prabhupada mentions Nirguna as without material qualities. Generally, I don't know why he specifically said here possessing or not possessing attributes. So one is actually he possesses spiritual attributes. The other is he doesn't possess material attributes. Normally, that's how I have understood this topic. So this is a slightly different. The Saguna means he actually has transcendental qualities. Nirguna means he doesn't have material qualities. So both means the same thing, that he has transcendental qualities. That's a better logic than saying he doesn't possess attributes. Means what? How can he be a person and not possess attributes? So that will not, I mean, we will not be able to substantiate that.
Okay, so is supreme without attributes is not equivalent to Shantarasa? That is
No, Brahman. That is Brahman. Supreme without attributes. See, attributes means Shanta also means there are attributes, no? The attributes which is making, see, Shanta Rasa actually is not a rasa at all, right? Shanta basically means it's a perception of the jiva saying that, okay, Lord is supreme. So that's fine. Thank you very much. That's all Shanta is. So Shanta has nothing to do really about the attributes or lack of attributes of the Supreme Lord. As in, still Shanta is used to refer, um, I mean, is one of the official rasas with Bhagavan, not with Brahman, right? So these are two different things.
okay. So I think supreme without attributes, yeah, more meaningful meaning might be Brahman, yeah. Impersonal Brahman, yeah, maybe.
Okay, 12.67. Ye tu sarvani karmani mayi sanyasya mat paraha ananyenaiva yogena mam dhyayanta upasate teshamaham samudharta mrityu samsara sagarat bhavami na chirat partha maya veshita chetasam. But those who worship me, giving up all their activities unto me and being devoted to me without deviation, engage in devotional service and always meditating upon me, having fixed their minds upon me, for them I am the swift deliverer from the ocean of birth and death. So this verse is setting the standard that we have to reach. Who worship me, giving up all their activities unto me, devoted to me without deviation, which means ekeha, engaged in devotional service and always meditating upon me, having fixed their minds upon me, for them I am the swift deliverer. It is explicitly stated here that the devotees are very fortunate to be delivered very soon from material existence by the Lord. In pure devotional service, one comes to the realization that God is great and that the individual soul is subordinate to Him. His duty is to render service to the Lord, and if it does not, then He will render service to Maya. As stated before, the Supreme Lord can be appreciated only by devotional service. Therefore, one should be fully devoted. One should fix his mind fully on Krishna in order to achieve Him. One should work only for Krishna. It does not matter in what kind of work one engages, but that work should be done only for Krishna. That is the standard of devotional service. The devotee does not desire any achievement other than pleasing the Supreme Personality of Godhead. His life's mission is to please Krishna, and he can sacrifice everything for Krishna's satisfaction, just as Arjuna did in the battle of Kurukshetra. The process is very simple. One can devote himself in his occupation and engage at the same time in chanting Hare Krishna. Such transcendental chanting attracts the devotee to the personality of Godhead. So Prabhupada here is slightly making it simple for those engaged in occupation, saying, okay, one can devote himself in his occupation and chant, and eventually that will attract the devotee to personality of Godhead. Now, what will this attraction do? Make sure that he doesn't do anything except trying to please Krishna. So coming to this platform is easy because by engaging in occupation and chanting Hare Krishna, finally we'll get attracted to Krishna. And then we will only engage fully in to achieve him. But most people don't completely clearly understand this and they say, okay, it's okay. Stane stita. However, somehow, I'm engaged in chanting Hare Krishna, that is enough. Yeah. But if you're chanting Hare Krishna properly, then we will make progress and come to the stage where we will not be able to do mundane material work, and we want to engage full time in devotional service. That is a result of proper sadhana. So that has to happen. It's not that this will just keep going on like this forever. The Supreme Lord herein promises that without delay he will deliver us pure devotee thus engaged from the ocean of material existence. Those who are advanced in yoga practice can willfully transfer the soul to whatever planet they like by the yoga process, and others take the opportunity in various ways. But as far as the devotee is concerned, it is clearly stated here that the Lord himself takes him. So this is amazing, right? Lord himself, he says, I am the swift deliverer. Not that somebody else will come. No, I will take the devotee. The devotee does not need to wait to become very experienced in order to transfer himself to the spiritual sky. So this is also amazing. See, it does not need to wait to become very experienced, meaning that if we have reached close to perfection, still we will enter Krishna's Leela. That is why actually in Bhauma Leela, there will be devotees who are not completely achieved perfection. They're almost there, but they're ready for apprenticeship. So they become part of the Bhauma Leela. Then they're fully sanctified, purified because because they're in touch with Krishna, and then they achieve perfection. So it's not that one has to become very experienced in order to transfer himself to the spiritual sky. In the Varaha Purana, this verse appears. Nayami paramam sthanam archir adi gatim vina garuda skandham aropya yatecham anivaritaha. The purport of this verse is that a devotee does not need to practice Ashtanga Yoga in order to transfer his soul to the spiritual planets. The responsibility is taken by the Supreme Lord himself. He clearly states here that he himself becomes the deliverer. A child is completely cared for by his parents, and thus his position is secure. Similarly, a devotee does not need to endeavor to transfer himself by yoga practice to other planets. Rather, the Supreme Lord, by his great mercy, comes at once riding on his bird carrier Garuda and at once delivers a devotee from material existence. Although a man who has fallen in the ocean may struggle very hard and may be very expert in swimming, he cannot save himself. But if someone comes and picks him up from the water, then he is easily rescued. Similarly, the Lord picks up the devotee from this material existence. Picks up. One simply has to practice the easy process of Krishna consciousness and fully engage himself in devotional service. Any intelligent man should always prefer the process of devotional service to all other paths. Narayaniya, this is confirmed as follows. Yavai sadhana sampatti purushartha chatushtaye taya vina tad apnoti naro narayanashrayaha. The purport of this verse is that one should not engage in the different process of fruitive activity or cultivate knowledge by the mental speculative process. One who is devoted to the Supreme Personality can attain all the benefits derived from other yogic processes, speculation, ritual, sacrifices, etc. This is the perfect benediction of devotional service. Simply by chanting the holy name of Krishna, a devotee of the Lord can approach the supreme destination easily and happily. But this destination cannot be approached by any other process of religion. The conclusion of Bhagavad Gita is Sarvadharman Parityajya Mamekam Sharanam Vrajam Tvam Sarva Papebhyo Mokshayishyami Ma Suchaha. One should give up all other process of self-realization and simply execute devotional service in Krishna consciousness. That will enable one to reach the highest perfection of life. There is no need for one to consider the sinful actions of his past life because the Supreme Lord fully takes charge of him. Therefore, one should not futilely try to deliver himself in spiritual realization. Let everyone take shelter of the Supreme Omnipotent Godhead, Krishna. That is the highest perfection of life. Now, what does this mean? There is no need for one to consider the sinful actions of his past life. Meaning we don't have to worry about how much sins we have, right? But still, Krishna will put the devotee through suffering because the devotee has to become strong, has to become fully dependent on Krishna, has to come to Brahmabhuta stage. For people who have sins and who are still engaged in service, they will go through some suffering in life, especially if they want to achieve perfection in this life. So because Supreme Lord fully takes charge, so while we might not have to worry about the previous sinful reactions that are there, but suffering will still be there. There is no question of escaping from the suffering. So in one sense, if we are too greedy to achieve Krishna in one life and we are not actually there yet, meaning from our previous practices, we are still not yet reached that stage. We are far from it, but we sincerely and very greedily want that. Then we'll have to go through some accelerated process. That accelerated process might be difficult to deal with for some people. But yeah, Krishna is still there. He is purifying us, but at the same time, he is with us. He is helping us to make progress as Chaitya Guru. So all that is there, but yeah, it is not the hunky dory, all no problem, smooth sailing may not happen. So that is why we should have complete faith in Krishna, saying that when we go through difficulties in life, we should realize that this is Krishna's special mercy, that he is helping me move faster on this path. So that is the reason why we need to have association of devotees who have gone through these stages. Then it will be easy for us to understand, saying, okay, this is what is going on. Okay, fine. This is for my ultimate good. So let me tolerate. Let me go through this suffering. Otherwise, we have to go through the path very alone, and that's not very easy. Many times we can get bewildered. Okay, so okay, we'll stop here for today. Any questions from anybody? No questions?
Hare Krishna, Prabhuji.
Yeah.
Prabhuji, what exactly Brahma Bhuta stage, Prabhuji?
Brahma Bhuta Prasannatma na sochati na kangshati. Na sochati na kangshati. Samasarveshu bhuteshu. So he is equipoised. He equally sees super soul in all jivas. He's not affected by happiness, distress. So Sthita Pragna. So you can read the second chapter, last verses of Sthita Pragna.
Okay.
That is Brahma Bhuta stage. And basically we have to raise above the material platform. So we are not affected by anything material. That is Brahma Bhuta. That means we firmly realize that we are Brahman, that we are not this material, that we are Atma. And we act on the platform of Atma, which means that this stage, we don't get affected by anything material happening around us. So you can read those Sthita Pragna verses, then you can more clearly understand what is the behavior of such a person. How does he behave? That's what Arjuna is saying, that, okay, you're talking about this Sthita Pragna, what are his qualities, how does he behave, how does he speak, how does he sit, how does he walk? So you can read those Sthita Pragna verses to get a complete understanding, but whatever I'm saying is just summary.
Okay.
And all of us have to come to that stage. Okay, so that is why sometimes, devotees are a little bit, what should we say, casual, saying, I'm practicing bhakti, Prabhupada said just practice bhakti, everything will happen. Yeah, but we have to still make progress. And progress is before we get into pure devotional service. This verse says, Brahma Bhuta Prasannatma na sochati na kangshati samasarveshu bhuteshu madbhaktim labate param. Madbhaktim means actually this is pure devotion. Before we get pure devotion to Krishna, we have to go through Brahma Bhuta stage. So which means that whether we are doing anything or not, we still have to make progress. We have to go through this stage. And if we are not going through it, and if we are engaged in practicing devotion service for many years, then we should realize that there is something wrong. We're not doing something proper. And we have to become concerned, and we have to talk and seek guidance, which is what concerns me many times, because devotees are so engaged, engrossed in their material life, and they want to find solutions, make progress, etc., putting all endeavor on that side, but not really thinking or worried about where they stand on the spiritual platform. Well, that is what we should really be worried about. Okay.
Okay.
Hare Krishna. Okay. No other questions, and we can end. Anchakalpatarubhyascha kripasin. Yeah.
Prabhuji,
Yeah.
one question.
Yeah.
It's mentioned as transcendental faith. Are
Your voice is
there any different levels
breaking. I
in
can't.
faith also? Great.
Okay, transcendental, great and transcendental faith. Okay.
No problem.
Yeah. Great and transcendental faith. Yeah. So Adav Shraddha Tada Sadhu Sangha Bhajana Kriya. So there's 3 levels of faith. Kanishtadhikari, Madhyamadhikari, Uttamadhikari. Kanishtadhikari has only faith in deity. He has no faith in or understanding of devotees. Madhyamadhikari has clear faith, love for devotees, and he avoids the atheists, and he shows compassion to the sattvic people who are more favorable. That is Madhyamadhikari faith. He doesn't have full understanding of Shastra, but he cannot defend himself, but he has faith that Krishna is the Supreme Lord and Bhakti is the process to achieve perfection, etc. Then Uttamadhikari is the topmost level of faith. And he sees Supreme Lord everywhere. He sees Supreme Lord in everything. That is his faith. So there are different levels of faith, and we have to come to the Uttamadhikari stage, not artificially, naturally, which means that we should not try to imitate this stage, but we should, naturally our behavior should be on that platform. So it's difficult to explain. Many times, we end up in this imitating business, and we should not imitate. So we have to, as we practice devotional service, we will make progress, and we will come to that platform when we see somebody who's maybe like troubling us. Still, we look at that person and say, "Oh, okay, super soul. Okay, this is Krishna's desire." So like that. So yeah, these are 3 different levels of faith. 11th canto, you can get more details. Okay. We'll end here. Vancha kalpatarubhyascha kripa sindhubhyo cha patitanam pavanebhyo vaishnavebhyo namo namaha samaveta gaura bhakti jai. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna. Dandavad.
Hare Krishna, Prabhuji. Dandavad.
Hare Krishna. Dandavad pranam. Okay. Hare Krishna. Disconnecting.